This is the Graceful Atheist Podcast. Welcome to the Graceful Atheist Podcast. My name is David, and I am trying to be the Graceful Atheist. Please consider telling a friend about the podcast, invite them to the Deconversion Anonymous Facebook group, and become a part of the community yourself. Special thanks to Mike T for editing today's episode. On to today's show. My guest today is Shannon. Shannon actually found the Graceful Atheist content on the blog. She read 2 articles of mine, How to Deconvert in 10-ish Easy Steps, as well as a set of thought experiments for believers. She then found the podcast, and that has been a major part of her deconversion journey. What I really appreciated about Shannon's story is that she delves into the emotional side of the process of deconversion and is willing to reveal that to us as we go along. Shannon grew up in the independent fundamentalist Baptist tradition and a very strict tradition, while simultaneously having parents and family who were scientists and lawyers and learned critical thinking fairly young. During her deconversion process, Ricky Gervais and a lot of his comedy made a huge impact on Shannon, and you're going to hear about that throughout her story. There will be links in the show notes for the 2 articles of mine, as well as references to Ricky Gervais's afterlife and the invention of lying. Here is Shannon to tell her story. Shannon, welcome to the Graceful Atheist Podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So we've been in contact all the way since back in November. You had a very, very kind things to say about the blog and the podcast and how it impacted you during your deconversion. So I'm really excited to hear your story. As always, I'd like to begin with, what was your faith tradition when you were growing up?
Yes. Okay. So the background that I have come out of as far as religion is what's called, it's Baptist, and it's called independent fundamentalism.
Okay.
I'm sure you've heard of that before.
Yes, we've had a few guests.
It's like the strictest Baptists of all the Baptists. This is like the, whatever, the A team. It's very, very like skirts only for women, long hair, no makeup. Now, thankfully, my family did not homeschool my sister and I. However, most of the, families in the church were homeschooled. That kind of thing was encouraged. Buy all the materials from this place, that kind of thing. So anyway, but thankfully also both my parents worked, and they had both been in the military. That's how they met. They were both in the Air Force. So
Okay.
they had a larger worldview than a lot of other adults that were in that group, thankfully. So I'll admit we didn't get too far down that rabbit hole, but I'm so glad we didn't. But it's interesting hearing from a young age, like, you are perfectly and wonderfully made. Did you know that? You are perfectly and wonderfully made just until you're born. Then you're a sinner and God hates you, and boy, for a young mind, as an adult now, I laugh at it, and joke around. And I love being like basically a sarcastic a-hole. It works. It makes me happy. But as a child, like, you don't know that's not real.
Right.
You're still learning what is real. So it's so damaging. And I'm sure you have a lot of people that have been through horrific abuse stories. I've fortunately never experienced anything like that in the church. Just the mental, and for some reason, David, Baptists are all about like demons. this
Yeah.
fear. It's like love Jesus and God and then be afraid of demons because they're everywhere. They're going to get you. They're behind every corner.
Yes. Yes.
And it is so, it's like embarrassing to tell you this, but like it's still within me to be like, oh, was that a demon? Like, why would I even ask that? What is wrong with
Yeah.
me? Well, let me tell you.
My background happened to be Pentecostal, so definitely spiritual warfare, and demons are real, so it doesn't surprise me at all. And especially if you grow up in that, like you said, child takes that as gospel, to use a phrase, that's real in every way possible, and so as an adult, it's hard to just tell yourself, "Oh, that's not true anymore." You have some built-in reactions from your childhood.
Well, it's like someone else trained your brain for you. Here's
Yeah,
how to think, because our brains can be trained, right? We know that. And so it's like someone else took the reins of your childhood brain, trained it for you, and now you as an adult have to pick up the pieces to like retrain it the other way.
right.
But yeah, so it's very interesting to allow my mind to shift from participant to observer.
Mm,
And I'll tell you, it did not happen overnight. It has taken, like, when I came across your podcast, I believe it was like October that we
okay.
communicated, we connected. Okay. So that was the time that I was going, there has to be people out there who have had issues like me, emotional issues such as I'm sad. I'm not sad. It's not that I'm sad because I don't have a godlike figure that I'm supposed to worship anymore.
Right.
I'm just sad because that type of figure never existed at all. And someone told me it did. And now it's like I feel like the adult version of Santa Claus when you're like, oh man, okay, I kind
Yeah.
of knew it. It would have been
Yes.
cool. You know,
Yeah,
I tell my
exactly.
husband all the time, here's like exactly what I feel like. Okay. I feel like the child who found out Santa wasn't real, it's like the next Christmas, right? A
Yes.
year has
Yeah.
gone by and they're looking around, they're like, I get it. This is a lot of fun. Other people, hee hee, like, okay, this is kind of cool. Yeah, the emotional impact. I mean, we're such emotional creatures, right?
Yeah.
It's just so easily manipulated.
That's a really interesting insight and a fantastic analogy of going from participant to observer. And the Santa Claus analogy is really apt, where you recognize maybe younger people than yourself. Oh, this is still fun and that's cute for them, but I'm older now. But yeah, there's something really deep, and what's painful about this when it comes to religion is there's a darker side to it. It isn't just all fun and games, and it's a bit tougher to go through that.
I'm in this weird place, as I'm sure so many people who come across your your site and happen across any of these podcasts like I did, and they were extremely helpful. um it's just I don't know how to say it. It's like something has shifted in you, like in your mind, and all of a sudden, things just fall away. um and you have to laugh at stuff, you
Yeah.
have to be able to, because if not, you will go crazy. Because I'm thinking, I was around I was around like 33 when I was just like, I'm done. But for a couple years I didn't really do anything or say anything. I was just kind of letting it all figure itself out in my mind and in my heart.
Yeah.
And in that time, you just have to find ways to laugh, or else you'll go crazy thinking, I've wasted a third of my life. I have a college degree that is worthless because it's religious studies,
Tell me
you
about it.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, wow, I have set myself up on this course for life. That is not a good one.
Yeah.
um, but hey, it better today than 20 years from now, right? So it's okay. It's fine.
I definitely think that is one of the processes we have to go through, whether it's deconstruction or full blown deconversion or something, but is when we reflect back on our lives, of course you're going to feel a little bitter of lost opportunities, things like that. But you also have to see what the good parts that it gave you. You know, you're still the person that you are today because of those experiences. When I think back, you know, I happened to meet my wife at Bible college. You know, I wouldn't give that up, right? Even if I had a time machine, I wouldn't give that up, right? My
I
children,
understand. Oh,
you know, that kind of
absolutely.
thing. So, and really, when I talk about secular grace and things like that, you know, obviously that's informed by my former Christianity and on some level,
Yeah.
and it's okay to say, hey, this bit is okay and good, and this bit sucks, and I'm totally ditching it.
Yeah.
We can just be critical about it and move on with our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and I think I was remembering what we were talking about earlier, which it doesn't happen overnight. I'm sure you and your wife probably are the same, and maybe not. Some people, I'm in awe of them. They just drop it immediately. They shift so hard mentally. They're done. And me, it's like little bits over time.
Yeah,
I think it's because deep down, like I'm trying to justify maybe why I was in it so long. And it's my own ego trying to explain to myself, well, this is why. And to just be like, hey, you know what, man, it's okay. Just let it go. And it's all, it's all. So like me, it takes a little time. It happens like in inches, and it's so strange. But the one thing that I was like, wow, no, I don't think this is working for me anymore, was
uh-huh.
actually a thought experiment. And that's how I came across your website. Was I was Googling thought experiments for Christians, or just any type of religion, anything to,
Interesting.
and I came across some great ones. But the one that I just realized that made me go, oh my god, okay, I'm going. It's like, um, was thinking about, right. So you're telling me, oh, we're fearfully and wonderfully made and all this. Unless you're born in the wrong country, in the wrong religion,
Mm,
you know, a lot of what I grew up with was kind of, unfortunately, you're the wrong skin color, or, or
yeah,
eye hair color, or world culture. So therefore, you didn't have access to Christianity. Oh, tough luck. You're going
yeah.
straight to hell. So though might have been born into poverty, right? You got the luck of the draw. Unfortunately, you're born into poverty. You're going to have a terrible life full of pain and suffering. And then I got news for you. It keeps going. You're going to die, and you're going to spend an eternity in even worse pain. It's like, what is the point of being alive? Like,
Yeah.
what I mean, in that scenario. And I just thought it's just ridiculous. So that was kind of one, that was the one that I was just like, okay, I think I'm done. And since then I have several along the way. I don't know if any of your other podcast guests, excuse me, experienced this, but now approaching Christians or anyone of religion who immediately want to, like, find out why am I an atheist?
Yeah.
I feel like, I get severe anxiety because, I was trained right from a young age, go into all the earth and, spread the gospel, Great
Yes.
Commission.
Right.
So I was
Right.
always in like sales mode. And that's why I was a realtor for 10 years, because it was so familiar to me. Oh, sales. I can sell anything to anyone, and here are
Yeah.
tricks and little manipulations, and great. So anyway, because I was living in that for so long, now I'm in this weird place of don't give a shit, and I want to help you open your mind. I'm kind of somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you.
But so I feel like having two or three of these great thought experiments kind of gives me that emotional ammo to not be like immediately like, oh, I'm having all this anxiety.
Right.
It's just like, it just helps me laugh at it. And one really great one was the one that I really liked on your website, Hell is the Absence of God, the review of that. That was great, because though I had never heard of it and I'd never heard of the author or anything like
Yeah.
that, um, I love thought experiments kind of like that review, because you can take the principle of it and kind of use it towards what someone might really relate to. So I felt like there were a lot of good principles that could be slightly crafted in a different way to, because knowing this person is like, Christian versus another religion or anything like that.
I'll take just a quick moment to say that was a review of Ted Chiang's. He has an anthology called Stories of Your Life, and one of those is Hell is the Absence of God. That is really a look at divine hiddenness, but well worth your time reading the short story. It's amazing, and the review is not that great, but I'm glad that it impacted you. So,
I thought it was great. Yeah. So anyway, what has helped me as far as deconversion, reading through the blog, the page about deconversion on your site, that was a big help. But also, kind of collecting these little thought experiments,
yes,
because it's a non-aggressive, non-attacking way to make someone stop and think. Hopefully, here's the problem that I find with a lot of them, that I have to kind of restructure. What I'm saying is, for example, your thought experiments on your website clearly are like, as a sane person, how don't you think this? How can you justify this? And I'm thinking, these people, they're going to say, well, because it's just my conviction, you
yeah.
know. So I have to find a way to get around them being able to use that answer. If that makes sense, because that's a non-answer. It's not real. But it's good. Ricky Gervais has a lot of great ones
Yeah.
in his stand-up, in his different interviews. There's some really great ones.
I definitely think that comedy as well is a way of getting past people's defenses. That you're just like, come on, a virgin, she gives birth. Come on, like,
Right.
but using the comedic aspect
Yeah.
of that, I think helps to
Why?
get people beyond their locked in dogma.
Right. Right. It's like, what's the point of the virgin birth? What's the point? Jesus had a brother. She had sex like right after him. Like, what
Yeah,
was the point of that?
right, right.
Anyway, yeah. No, I totally agree. So, yeah, I guess that is kind of what is helping me. If it resounds or strikes a chord with someone kind of going through the deconversion process. And I like kind of how, I think that you made a point in the deconversion page on your website
Mhm.
saying, it's like, it takes as long as it takes, and it's okay. And you don't have to, at especially within the Christian religion, there is this must proclaim thing that's put in you from young. I must proclaim this. So it's almost, as an atheist, I'm like, because it's so ingrained in me, just that behavior.
Right.
I'm almost like, no, I must go out and proclaim. And I'm like, okay, wait, no. So reading that was so helpful. It's like letting me allow myself,
Yes. Yeah.
very, very good to be able to read that.
Yeah, you're making several points here that I want to just highlight, and that is that, especially for those of us who are part of like fundamentalist evangelicalism, that there's the impetus to, okay, now I'm deconverted, now I'm an atheist, I have to tell everyone, and I have to justify myself from the get-go. And even beyond that, a handful of the Christians, the believers in our lives, will also expect that of you. They will say, hey, what's your entire life philosophy? How do you justify morality? How do like, and you might just be in the middle of the grief process, and you have not yet systematized your philosophical underpinnings for ethics and uh, morality, and that's okay, right? Like, it can take years, and it is fine for you to grieve, have that emotion, go study, learn the things you're interested in, or ignore them entirely. You just have so many options that, without someone standing over you saying you have to do it this way.
I love that. It's, and it can be a painful process. So if I feel like crying, I cry, because I have this sense that God doesn't love me, or like I'm not pleasing my grandparents, who were staunch,
Mm.
staunch pillars of that community, and they were very strong with a group within the Baptists, they called Sword of the Lord.
Okay. I can imagine.
Anywho, you're welcome to Google it if you want. So anyway, these things that were put in me from such a young age, it's just like muscle memory for my brain. So
Right.
being able to, okay, they have both passed, they're both gone, like they're not even alive anymore. It doesn't matter, you
Mm.
know. Another thing that I just want to actually say about these thought experiments, since it's on my mind real quick, if you don't mind, is
Sure.
the number one that I have found so helpful because boy, when especially let's say the groups that you or I were involved with, the
Hmm.
very maybe militant kind of I want to convert you, actively trying to convert people mindset. Um, it's they get down to the nitty gritty, and it's like I found this little thing from Ricky Gervais that I just have used so many times because when it gets down to it, it's like this. You say there's a God. Okay, this is what I took from him, right? This is his, I love it.
Yeah.
It's he crafted this and I use it all the time. Um, you say there's a God. I say, can you prove it? And you say no, and I say, well, okay, I don't believe you then.
Right.
That's it. I'm not gonna go back and forth on like who wrote the Bible and is it even complete and where are the missing, like it, none of it. Like this is the bottom line,
Right.
and that has kind of helped shut down so many things. So I mean, conversations that are going off the rails, if you know what I mean, as they can get when you know. So I don't know if that might help someone, but like I literally have it written down, and that because that's all I need is, can you prove it? No. Okay, I don't believe you then. Like that's all that. So I hope that that helps someone else because I use that quite a lot.
Absolutely. So the article that you're referring to that I wrote is called "How to Deconvert in 10 Easy Steps," and it's a joke title, which I wish I would not have done, but here we are 4 years later. But one of the points in there is that there's a time period where things are kind of happening to you, and then there's a point at which what I call the permission to doubt phase, and it sounds like that's what you went through when you began to look for these thought experiments and things. I'd like to backtrack just a bit. Like, what was it like before you gave yourself permission to doubt? What were the things that were leading toward that? And again, we acknowledge that it wasn't one thing; it was 1,000 things, I'm sure. But like any mile markers along the way that you remember.
Yes. Well, from mentally saying this isn't real, I think I'm done, to like being done. It was torture, but it didn't last long. I stopped going to church a couple years ago, even though I probably would still call myself a Christian for a couple years,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
I kind of got used to those quick little one word religious hot button answers just to make you shut up and leave me alone. So
Yes, yeah.
so that's within that bubble, I kind of have a bit of a like again sarcastic kind of a bit of a rebel streak. So it's like you tell me where the rules are so I can go up to them.
Yes. Dip my toe across the line.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So like within that bubble, right? I did what I could just to make myself laugh, just to make, I don't know, make things funny. So, you do what you can. You do what you can. I think probably to answer your question, just lots of little things. I think one of the biggest ones was like the praise and worship time of a service.
Yeah.
Because usually, they want the emotions high. And I went to a very, very, very strict Baptist Bible college. It is still in operation, it's in Tennessee, the strictest of the strict.
Okay.
And they would show these young, like preacher boys, right, how to structure their service, hour long or whatever.
Yeah.
Here, so like you want the emotions high right before you step up to the pulpit. So there's the praise and worship service, and that's when you have it, tambourines, Jesus hands, the whole thing.
Yeah.
So I guess for me it was kind of like everything is a show for
Mm.
someone else. Everything. A commercial, a religious service. Like nothing is real. Like do you understand that? And I didn't for years. And I feel like now I do. And part of me for a while was very sad, David. Again, because someone had told me there was this loving, godlike thing. And, do good and you'll get a present, or however it went. And so it's weird because it's like I'm sad at something that's not real. Someone else told me that was, but for some reason my emotional body is still responding to that.
Right.
So I think coming across your website, all in all, being able to like be like, okay, I can take my time, chill, it doesn't have to happen overnight. I don't know. I think, like you said, a lot of little things like that.
Okay. I want to go even just a step prior to that. So before you started to go up to the line
Thank
and
you.
dip your
It's
toe
layered.
over.
Let me
Yeah,
get
yeah.
there. You're doing great. Okay. Thank you.
So let me give you a framework to think about this. There's lots of analogies. I like Amy Logan. She talks about, and it's something that happens to you and you go, you know what? I'm not going to think about that now. I'm going to put that on the shelf. I'll think about that later. Where there are events like that, where, prior to giving yourself permission to doubt, where
Yeah.
it made you think, oh, maybe
Yes.
this isn't real, that kind of thing.
Yes. The biggest thing was definitely abortion.
Ah, okay. Well, this is timely.
Yes. And I'm shocked it's still ringing true. And I'm talking like as a teenager.
Okay.
Because I'm thinking it's just ridiculous if a young woman or any woman is taken advantage of sexually, becomes pregnant. It's not the right thing for her. It's just not the right thing. It shouldn't have happened to begin with. And
Right.
it's a little, zygote. It's not even, this isn't even like a viable embryo. It's not going to survive outside of the womb. It's not like we're killing a baby. No, look at me. It's ridiculous to be like, this cluster of molecules has a soul and it's being perfectly made right now. It's being perfectly made.
Right. Right.
I don't know. I just thought, boy, it's ridiculous. So, I don't know. I kind of always had questions about where's the rest of the Bible? Like, I would ask my mom as a teenager, who decided it was Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John? Who?
Right.
Why isn't it any other combination? Well, the Holy Spirit. Nope, that's not good enough. I'm a teenager now. My mind, it's working. I know. So,
Yes.
and no one could answer me, and so to find out, oh, people just like us put it together,
Yeah.
decided
Yeah.
okay, right.
Yeah.
That took a lot of the mystery and myth away. That kind of knowledge is power, right? And we have search engines. And so it's like, if you're ever just wondering, just give it a Google, just search, because so many times that has helped with, understanding the facts behind something. It has helped tremendously.
Yeah.
So I know it sounds dumb, but it's like, oh, you didn't know this as a kid? No. Okay. No. I was in
Yeah.
a bubble. I was purposely kept from like big cities. We didn't go to big metro areas, too much crime. Oh, no. Okay. I'm catching up. That's all I have to say. I'm catching up now. It's better late than never.
I think what you're describing though is really common, right? On the outside, on this side of deconversion, it seems like, well, that's just obvious. But no, like the church does not make a habit of mentioning, oh, by the way, this was inspiration by committee, or explaining how the sausage has been made as far as the Bible is concerned. And so many people become adults and suddenly do, like you say, do a Google search and go, wow, I never knew that. I never knew that. And that changes everything.
It's like your instant reaction, at least mine was to get mad at yourself for being so dumb. Oh my God, how can I have been this stupid? But that's what I mean when I say, hey, man, just go easy on yourself, please.
Yes.
I have finally learned to allow myself to go easy on myself, weirdly enough, but
Yeah.
different people are wired differently. Overthinkers, it takes a while to get there.
Yes.
Because that old ego wants to justify every little, so it's like, okay, just rip the Band-Aid off, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Good.
So we've been going through a few of the steps from the article. So what I called the precipitating events were some of these doubts. Abortion was one for you.
Yep.
Critical mass as they start to pile up and really there's just you can't contain it anymore.
Yep.
And you went through that permission to doubt stage where you were looking and searching for thought experiments and doing the Google searches, like you say. You're just finding your information gathering at that point. I want to talk a little bit about and again, you said this took a while, right? Like there was a couple of years, but was there a moment where you thought, I really don't believe this anymore? Like I'm done. And what was that moment like?
Okay. Yes. So again, duh, it's a little embarrassing, but I'm just going to tell you.
Okay. All right.
Right. So I'm married. I have a wonderful husband. In July, it'll be 6 years we've been married. He is agnostic. He's he kind of like wants to be a Viking. If you he's an agnostic. He's open. And
Yeah.
when we got married, I was still very in sales, both in real estate and in religion, if you know what I mean.
Okay.
Just
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah.
But we had known each other all through high school. We'd known each other for 20 years before we got married. We're friends all that time. So, I mean, he's seen me, so he knows, So anyway, he is like literally the only person on this planet that I can stand to be around every day. And that can stand to be around me, let's be
Yeah.
honest, every day. And he is the perfect fit. Here we go. We've been friends for 20 years. I've known you since high school. We're getting married. Our families both live in the same city. It's like, come on, the perfect thing. And my grandparents were like, it's just that he's just not a Christian. What are you doing with your life? And I'm
Mm,
thinking, you know, meanwhile, even at Bible school,
right.
where preacher boys are being trained, I saw several of them get in trouble and kicked out for beating their wives, for getting
Oh,
into
wow.
drugs,
Yeah.
for having mistresses. These are real people, and this religion is trying to all of a sudden put these men on a pedestal just because they turn 18 and decide that they want to be a pastor.
Right. Right.
Well, they're still people; they're still human.
Yeah. And it is an impossible standard.
It's just ridiculous. So, and I thought, and I didn't say it because you see, I was raised to be very respectful, almost borderline fearful of them in that respect. You'll respect me through fear. So I didn't say this, but in my mind, I was like, you would rather me marry some, church approved young preacher boy in training
Right.
who could do any of these things to me. Like I've seen these young little girls go through that grew up sheltered and didn't know if you're being abused, it's okay to say something.
Yeah.
Things like you'd rather me go through that than marry someone who I'm known for 20 years and he's not. It just struck me as, wow. I mean, how much more do you want? Because it showed me no matter what I give, there will be one step further. It's just not good enough. No, not good enough. You know what? So, and I thought, no, okay, here's where I draw the line, knowing, oh, wow, that was the big realization of it will never be good enough.
Yeah.
Because if I had married, say, someone of their approval of that nature, it would have been, well, why aren't you missionaries to Papua New Guinea? Or why aren't you poor? Because that's how we should be. It's never going to be good enough.
I think that's a deep insight, actually. I think
Yeah.
that's absolutely true.
I
But
thought,
yeah.
I'm not going to wait until I'm possibly in a horrible home life situation, no income source, no resources, 4 or 5 children deep to shake myself out of this thing. I'm not going to let myself get there. So, anyway, so we got married, and he has been so awesome because he married me when it was like, super strict.
Okay.
But I think he saw I was just done. So we had the big Christian wedding, all the big thing, and all prayers and all that. And then over time, yeah, I just stopped going to church. I think it started with Easter. Stopped going to church, and it just kind of I was like, I'm done. So now everybody knows, and now everybody's on the attack with me, like at all times. Like must
Yeah.
convert you back. We are getting together with our dear, dear friends who live in a different state, and they're both Christians. We're getting together. We're doing a vacation this fall, and even just now coordinating it and all this, even just now my friend has been like, I really want to sit and have some conversations with you. I'm like, great, great. You know what? Talk for an hour. Here's my thing. Is there a God? you know, can you prove it? No, I don't believe you. That's all there is to it, So
It is really simple, and really, I think that the point that you're making there with Ricky's little outline is something I say a lot too. That you can describe deconversion as the raising of your standard of evidence, right? While you're in the bubble, like your standard of evidence is super low. Like you were talking about the Bible being, put together by people, and you just
yes.
accept that as divinely inspired. And as you just slowly start to think, okay, I need a little more evidence than that. I need a little more evidence than that. And then at some point you go, wow, this is just cultural. It's just human. And there's no reason why this is special in any way. and and then when someone's trying to convince you, it just has no explanatory power, no evidential power, and you're just done.
Yeah. And it's important to find things, which this essentially for me, David, is giving me this right now. It's important to find things that you can sort of explain what's going on the inside, because so many people who have not deconverted from any type of structure they're in, mental
Sure.
construct they're in, right? Could even be a political one, whatever. They don't get it yet. They don't get what happens emotionally. So I don't know, giving yourself things to give you the words to say. And a lot of that for me, my husband and I are huge nerds. He's, evidence based, fact based type person. Watching The Cosmos, hosted by Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Yes.
Weirdly enough, it is so elegantly done. And of course, I know it's like a continuation of like the original one written by Carl Sagan, and
Right.
it's just so timeless. But it gave me a lot of little sound bites, if you will, of things that was like, oh yeah, and a lot of them were about nature, believe it or
Mm-hmm.
not. That would kind of just debunk like the Adam and Eve story. um I love where they set up, if the entirety of the existence of the universe was on a 30-day calendar, our planet would be like the last day, the last corner. People would be
Yeah.
like the last pinpoint of the last corner.
Yeah.
So it's amazing to be like, wow, I just have so much a deeper respect knowing I don't have to think I have dominion anymore, right? That's another very Christian viewpoint where we have dominion over the earth, humans. No, we don't. And just just respect it for what it is. I think it's Richard Dawkins that says, I don't have to add anything to it to make it special.
Right.
I don't have to add something to nature to be in complete awe every day at just how different systems communicate all in one planet. I mean, it's amazing. To me, like that is magic. Seeing, tracking that evolution happening, like, wow, what more do you need? And I love that idea of I don't have to add anything to it to make it special. Well, this evolutionary leap happened. Oh, God did that.
Yeah.
You know.
The
Anyway,
incredibly shrinking God of the gaps. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
heavy
Yeah.
sighing. That's all I can say sometimes. That's okay. All right.
Yeah.
So I guess my advice, what again has helped me, is right away kind of finding those sound bites, because I think not being able to express is what's giving me that anxiety. So when people are
Right.
like, well, I didn't grow up religious. Why are you having a hard time getting rid of Baptist stuff?
Yeah.
And I'm like, there's an ocean of emotions raging within me, but I just don't have that quick thing to say. So seeking that out, which is kind of why I kind of was drawn toward Ricky Gervais. A lot of his stuff is very short, to the point, brilliant, eye-opening. I use a lot of it again. I bought right away, like for Christmas, my husband bought me like 12 books by Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, just a lot of
Okay.
the usual suspects, right? Great. I'm starting out. I don't have any of that. So it was wonderful working my way through them. So many aha moments. And
Yeah.
again, sound bites. Knowledge is power. Just giving those fact, science based, evidence based things to say It's like if you want to keep arguing with me after that, this conversation's over because nothing I can say is gonna,
Right.
you know. At this point, it's a battle of wills. It's about ego. It's not about who's right. So I'm done.
Yeah. I want to circle back just for a second on the emotions that you
Oh
feel.
boy.
One of the things you mentioned in the email to me was about the experience of mourning the loss of faith.
Yes.
And it
Oh,
really is a sense of grief. And as you said earlier in the conversation, it's not that you're mourning, God, but rather that sense of loss. You had something that is gone now. And one of the things that we've tried to do with this podcast is acknowledge that human experience. And sometimes when we talk to pure atheists who grew up atheists their entire lives, they have no concept. And just like you said, they say, well, why can't you just let it go? So I want to talk a little bit about the emotion. Like what was it like for you? What is it like now emotionally? And just recognition that this is a human experience and it's more than just pure rationality.
indeed. Boy, I wish that everything could be solved rationally. That'd be so much easier. Well, and I'll tell you, boy, pure atheists like that, man, part of me just is so jealous to not have to
Yeah.
give up. I mean, go through this ripping away of this, like, it's almost like mental Velcro. You got to just keep slowly ripping till you get there. Don't give up. Don't give up. And
Yeah.
but it's kind of like we said before, right? Thank you, Shrek. We're layered like an onion. We really are.
Yes.
And I think you're right. Is those of us, my father's an engineer, my mother's a nurse, grew up weirdly in a household that had science and praised that, but within a certain framework of, we're going to filter science through Christianity. Like, okay,
Yeah.
child books with like people and dinosaurs playing together.
Yes.
Oh
Yeah.
boy. Okay. So I guess just having that analytical mind and wanting to consider myself a smarty pants, right? Come
Yeah.
on. We all do a little bit in our own areas of expertise. So my own ego, just saying, okay, it's just me here, guys, in my head, right? It's just me. I'm just going to let it kind of drip out of me at its own pace. It's okay that I spent a third of my life I consider wasted, formidable years living in a mental construct. It's okay. I feel I'm out now. Stop trying to negotiate with yourself and stop trying to justify how a smarty pants, someone as brilliant as you, could have been
Yes.
involved in this group. Well, first of all, remember, if you were like me, nobody asked me when I was being born, where do you want to go to? The freest
Right.
place on earth, please. No one asked me that. I was born where I was, and hey, that's okay. A lot of what I say to try to just stop a conversation if someone is going and going and going about, like, well, you're telling me you don't believe, you know, is I say, just don't try to justify yourself the why. Just allow yourself to move on. Because
Yeah.
it's like, don't let one day go by where you're still mad at yourself. And you might be for a time. Like I spent about 6 months mad at myself. Like, I cannot believe, my good friends are like scientists and chemists and, I like, what am I, right?
Yeah.
But the truth of it is, even they are so much more than their career, and it's okay to not use that as the yardstick of value anymore, as we've been taught to. So just kind of allowing yourself to have your own aha moments. We all have different experiences within church. So
I think what you've been describing is what I talk about, like the sense of guilt at your former gullibility, and that can be really humbling as well. It's a bit of, like you've mentioned a couple of times, I think, a bit of an ego stroke,
I
or
say,
the opposite of that,
to
of
be honest,
a ding against your ego. And again, having a little self grace there to say, you are in a bubble that was reinforcing everything, and it was rejecting anything that would be critical. And it takes a lot of work to come out of
Yep.
that.
But what's great though is like I feel like recognizing that anyone in sales, you're kind of you've got goals, so you're constantly the dollar bills in front of you, right? And you're on a string, like, and you're reaching for it. So like you have just that bleeds into every area of your life, that kind of thinking. So to allow that to go in one area, that has also shifted in all the other areas. So it's like I'm not in real estate anymore. I wouldn't want to go back to it because I'd have to put myself in that place again, of
Yeah.
and it's like, I don't want to anymore. So it's actually going to help someone potentially, as it has me, on many levels emotionally. I feel a lot lighter. It's odd, but I after sometimes crying or something, there is an emotional release there, and
Yeah.
I've told my husband, like, I feel like 10 pounds lighter. I do. And it's all in our minds, but you know what? If it's real, then it's real for you. So,
Yeah. So that's a real emotion as well as the relief. I like to say, like you have that moment, and yes, you go through a lot of grief. Yes, it can be painful, but also you feel like, wow, this is. And the irony is that it sounds a lot like a born again testimony, right? Like I'm free. I can. The
I'm
scales have
unborn
fallen from my
again. Yeah,
eyes. Yeah, yeah.
right.
It is hysterical how close to that it is, and yet that's the experience. That's what it feels like.
And I tell people, you know what, man, if you can't, we're all going to deconstruct in our own ways because unfortunately we all have different traumas, and they are traumas, scars. But for me, a lot of it has been through the comedy of it, kind of seeking out, like, for example, on YouTube, seeking out different clips of atheist comedians, or just, it's
Right.
just so funny. It has helped. I've been like rewriting old hymns that are like just
Yeah.
as something funny for me, with like different words that are totally irreverent, raunchy, no bueno, don't do that. and and it just, hey, it just makes me laugh because I figure, like Ricky Gervais says, people are scared to think that there's nothing after this.
Right.
It is, it's so scary. It's such a fear because it was taught to be, right? But it's like once you realize that, as he says, once you die, it might feel like the 13.5 billion years before you were born. That's what it's going to feel like. So that's what does make this life so precious. And that's what does make moments of brevity and laughter and connection so precious, because we, like how many other millions of beings in each of their species, are continuing on the race like it.
Since you've mentioned Ricky Gervais, there's two pieces of content of his that I really really like. One is a movie that went nowhere, but it's called The Invention of Lies, and in it, Ricky plays a character that I believe it's his mother or his grandmother is dying, and the conceit is that in this world that no one can lie. Everyone tells the truth. So everyone says, horrible things to one another because no one knows how to lie. So, but he's on his with his mother on her deathbed, and she says, what's going to happen to me? And he just starts riffing, and he's like, oh, you're going to go to a wonderful place. It'll be, clouds and this and that and the other. And he lies for the first time, and then hilarity ensues, right? He learns that he can lie, and that's the rest of the story. But the brilliance of that particular idea, that setup, is that clearly that's the beginning of religion, is our inability to accept our own death and the death of our loved ones, and really being able to accept that they have ceased to be, they no longer exist. That is psychologically really difficult to handle, and especially, like, if you're trying to explain that to a child, grandma died, that's very hard. And you start to just make things, you soften it a bit, but it becomes lies, is the point that Ricky was making. So, and then the other piece of content is Afterlife, which is a Netflix show of Ricky's. And this is a case where Ricky plays a character where his wife has cancer and ultimately she dies. And it's coming to grips with that in a very real and again gets into the emotion of that. This is less a comedy and more dramedy of just the reality of losing someone you love. And not to diminish that at all. That's the most painful human experience that can occur. But it is much better to truly grieve loss than to pretend that heaven exists, right? That kind of thing.
I absolutely agree. I had not heard about the first one. That sounds awesome. Very interesting. I think it's so amazing when you pretend that there are boundaries and you set them up for someone else, and they grow up and in their mind, their psyche sets up that boundary.
Mm-hmm.
You know, wow, it's like psychological warfare. I mean, it's like, you know, there's an amazing behavioral analyst, behavioral scientist named Chase Hughes, and he has helped take away a lot of the mystery of like what's happening in your brain when you're feeling something emotionally. Because I've heard, well, I have felt God in my heart in church, and that's how I know God's real. And I know because I used to feel that way. I've had lots of emotional experiences, boy, but let's find out from a neuroscientific standpoint what's going on in your, as he calls the mammalian brain, right behind your ears right here, like what's going on that you're already hardwired to do.
Right.
And I tell people, that's the same amazing rush of wonderful emotions I get at like a classic rock song or something, another familiar thing that makes me feel happy. So
Yeah.
anyway, but afterlife, wow, it has been a powerful tool. And I found out about it at the end of season 2. So when I was watching it, season 3 just came out. And so I was able to kind of experience that one fresh off. And yeah, that was amazing. So many great like one-liners, or like what just little sound bites, as I say.
Yeah.
And I love the one. Oh my goodness. I rewatched this so many times. Just to get the wording right, but it was the one where, right, Ricky Gervais' character is speaking to a friend of his, an older woman whom he met at the graveyard, right? Because that's where her husband was buried next to his wife. So they meet there often at a bench and talk. And I love this, the story of the frog and the scorpion. That,
Yes. Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll just go through it real quick if no one's heard of it. And I hadn't, and I stopped it. I hit pause and I said, "Wow!" So the parable, if you will, of the frog and the scorpion. Frog and a scorpion meet one day at the riverbank, and the frog is about to swim over, and the scorpion says, "Can I jump on your back? Will you take me over?" And the frog says, "Well, you'll sting me." And the scorpion says, "No, I won't. I won't. I promise. If I stung you, we'd both drown. What would be the point of that? I won't sting you." Okay, so the frog takes the scorpion on its back. Halfway through the river, the scorpion starts stinging the frog, and the frog says, "Why are you stinging me?" And the scorpion says, "I'm a scorpion." And 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 I was like, "Well, what does that mean?" And then of course Ricky has lines that just explain what it is, and it's amazing. In other words, we do things we know we don't want to do. We do
Mhm.
things we know it's going to end bad. But we allow ourselves to be convinced. On
Yeah.
some level, we want to believe that the scorpion won't sting me. And in the end, the scorpion explains, "It's my nature to do this. You knew I was going to do it. How many times do we do that to ourselves?" It's just so brilliantly written. So, um, and honestly, it has helped with deconversion. It really has. I just can't explain it. So it is definitely a tool I would recommend, is the show Afterlife, because it has helped me truly. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
Shannon, one last subject I want to go over is telling people. So you've already mentioned that, lots of people in your world know and are kind of coming at you. But I'm really curious what the conversation was like with your husband. So he's an agnostic. He knew you when you were the strict evangelical. What was it like when you kind of said, "You know what? I think I've changed my mind"? What was that conversation like?
Yeah. I was just like, we hadn't been to church in a while, and I was just like, I'm done. I'm like, I think one day, um, okay, this, I was watching this beautifully done clip by, I guess, a team in India on Shiva. Okay,
Uh-huh.
his attributes and just why he has what he has. And I just thought, man, this is so awesome. And I love different world cultures. I'm just gonna watch it because this is just cool. And it's beautiful colors, wonderful. And then and I asked him in the car that day. I said, "Is Shiva real?" And he's like, "What?"
Okay.
And I said, "Is Shiva real? Like Lord Shiva?" And then I said, "Is Jesus real?" And he's like, maybe nothing's real.
Uh-huh.
Maybe physicists smarter than us think that we are all in a program that we're being manipulated by extraterrestrials telepathically, and these are people that are brilliant.
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
that's real.
Right.
And it was just so eye-opening to be like, wow, thank you. Thank you to, my partner in crime, so to speak, a person that I live with,
Yeah.
for giving me this space to be like, maybe, I'm going to stop saying, I'll tell you another side note. One thing that gave me severe anxiety and that I miss
Uh-huh.
was that like certainty, if you know
Yeah.
what I
Oh
mean.
yeah.
That like, well, gosh darn it, I've got a path in front of me, and I have a mission in life and I know what to do. Having that ripped away, forgive me, but I mean, having any type of thing ripped away, I had moments of, I get it, where you are so, I don't have a path anymore. What good am I? Why am I here? What if I wasn't here? What would anything change? And I can imagine it's very similar to, probably a lot worse than this, but very similar to like soldiers coming back going through PTSD who've had that identity that was taught to them, right? Ripped away from them. Same as
Right.
me, but in a different area. So I don't know. Just having a husband to be like, I don't know, is Satan real? Maybe Satan's actually God and God's actually Satan.
Yeah, yeah.
Why doesn't God kill Satan? Like Ricky Gervais says, I love that bit. Why doesn't God kill Satan? Oh, such good tools to make one laugh. That just what makes you feel better.
So I'm going to do the exact thing I said we don't like when Christians do this to us, but what do you find meaning in now? Like what are the things that give you that awe, that feeling of maybe not purpose per se, but having a sense of what you're all about, that kind of thing.
Yes, right. Yes. So yeah, and to be honest with you, that is kind of still developing
Okay.
currently.
So
But
that's a good answer. So yeah.
okay, because being ingrained to have a purpose, have a mission, I immediately felt like I had to have something. I had to have a mission. It just, I will always have a mission. It may just, the title will shift, right?
Yeah.
Well, and then I had to come to grips with this. It's okay to not have a mission. Maybe it's
Yes.
okay to just, we have some things in my family that need assistance. We have an older family member with dementia, so coordinating caregivers for him, being there for family. Maybe it's
Yeah.
okay to be there emotionally instead of having to make setting arbitrary goals and then must reach them. Like me, I love to tick things off mentally because I'm weird. so so maybe I don't even set up those bullet points to tick off, because does that make sense? So
Yeah.
I guess finding the comedy and stuff, weirdly, like when people laugh, even like if I can make my mom laugh because she is the staunchest, very, 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 very Christian.
Yeah.
And so we'll be having this debate, and when she doesn't let go, and she is a syrupy, sweet Southern woman and precious, precious woman. But here's
Bless
where
her
we
heart.
differ. And where when she won't let go, I'll just look around and I'll go, Mama tried.
Yeah.
Mama
Yes.
tried. She tried. That's all I can say. And then she will bust out laughing. I really did try, I really did. So it's just it even just kind of being okay to not be right, and
Yeah.
being okay. Maybe what's right is that we all part ways friends, as best as I can lay out this like conversational thing for the moment where we just laugh.
Yeah.
Um because my grandparents were kind of like involved with like a lot of the stricter kind of more go out and go forth and convert, a lot of people, and they started churches and it's in their name. So it's like, it's a kind of within this tiny, tiny circle, they're well known. So that kind of like, well, what would your grandparents, if they see you right now, what would they think? And my response is, they're dead. They're dead.
Yeah.
We can do whatever we want, hand motions, all that, wishful thinking, but they're dead. And just because I'm an atheist doesn't mean I'm skeptical of everything. If someone, like, I love the pragmatism of Richard Dawkins, because he even says, listen, all it takes from the supernatural to become natural, and mainstream science is proof of it.
Yeah.
So like, if people are like, well, I can speak with dead relatives and provide comfort, great, what an amazing thing. Can you prove it? No. Okay, well then I don't believe you. That's as
Right.
simple as that. So it's like, so many things I wish were true. Oh, wouldn't it be amazing if that were true?
Exactly.
Oh well.
You're basically telling my story. Like I came to a moment where I said to myself, are these things possible? Yeah, they're possible, but I have to draw the line somewhere. So my line is that things that have evidence, and I just came to acceptance of, I need to be convinced with evidence, and that's just the way I'm going to live my life. And that has consequences that made me an atheist, what have you. But like, I'm totally comfortable with that. And what we don't know, and let's go find out. And like, yeah. So, you can you're open-minded enough that you can be convinced by evidence, but just wishful thinking isn't enough.
Oh, wow, the depths of that last statement. Yes, because I feel like there are some pretty amazing studies going on out west right now that have to do with consciousness. Can we expand beyond our physical form? I mean, there's some amazing, groundbreaking, sort of in the metaphysical realm studies going on. So it's like, in our lifetime, and you and I might see this, there could be some amazing proof that is presented, and it now is mainstream because everything was a theory to begin with, right? Everything.
Yeah.
So it's like, I have good friends who are in the occult. I have a very good friend who considers herself a witch and is practicing in
Mm-hmm.
her field of interest. I think that's awesome. And she'll tell me about energy shifting, and I'll say, probably what you just said, there's a lot of physicists that would agree with you, probably from like that standpoint. And there's a lot of, I think, really exciting things coming to light within like the quantum realm. Goodness, I don't know anything about that, but I love kind of listening to, again, Neil deGrasse Tyson has a YouTube channel called Star Talk, and he kind of has a brilliant way of putting the jelly on the bottom shelf. Thank you. So, astrophysics for people in a hurry, his book.
You're right.
That's great. So, and he even makes a statement, the universe is under no obligation to make sense to you, right? In other words,
Yeah.
like he explains, our five senses that were developed as we were surviving on the plains of Africa, that we still have. Maybe there are more senses yet to be developed. Who knows? So I guess that is helping me have an open mind, thinking about the possibilities of what will be proven within those scientific fields of study. That excites me. You know what I mean? The thought of, hey, maybe we will have proof. And so I use that to encourage like friends of mine that are in like the spiritual side of things and are convinced that XYZ is true. And if you do this 108 times, this magical thing will happen in your life. And you know what? Hey, cool. If you're into that, that's cool. All we need is proof. I mean, that's it. That's
Yep.
it. And maybe someday we'll have it. And that's, I think, what makes me really excited, because like everything we have now, I mean, germ theory was like laughed at one point, for goodness sakes, so
Yeah.
what might be proven that we get to experience? Oh, that is, I think, the coolest thing. So, yeah.
That feels like an excellent place to wrap up. So, Shannon, thank you so much for being on the podcast and for sharing your story. I think there'll be lots of people who relate to lots of things that you've said, but I've appreciated the honesty and the sense of humor about everything. It's been wonderful having you on. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Final thoughts on the episode. I really appreciated Shannon digging into a little bit more of the emotional side of deconstruction and deconversion. Many guests do. I don't mean to say that this is unusual, but I appreciated the way she framed it. To quote her, she says, "From mentally saying, this isn't real, I think I'm done, to actually being done, it was torture." I think she just viscerally expresses what that is like, the loss, the grief. And as she points out, it is different than what Christians think we experience, the God-shaped hole in our hearts, but rather it is the loss of connections with other people. It is the loss of a sense of someone who is there watching over you, who cares. It is the turning upside down of your entire worldview, your entire paradigm of how reality works. There's a lot of grief there. And what made Shannon particularly interesting is that while simultaneously describing the emotional experience of deconversion, she was also really fascinated by the intellectual side. As a part of her permission to doubt phase, was looking for thought experiments. And it was the thought experiment of how lucky she was. She happened to grow up in the United States, happened to grow up in the exact right religion in the exact right time period, which is a very compelling point to recognize that had you grown up in a different location with a different religious cultural environment, you probably would have been a part of that religious movement. I also really appreciated her quoting Ricky Gervais to say, "You believe in God. Can you prove it? No? I'm sorry, I can't follow you there. I don't believe that." It really is that simple. And I think we way overcomplicate it sometimes, delving into the deepest of philosophical arguments, when it really does come down to my new rule is that I believe things that have evidence for them. I don't believe things that are based on hearsay and historical reference and cultural tradition. And it really is truly that simple. Ricky Gervais obviously had a huge influence on Shannon, and the comedic aspect of looking at the silliness of religion, I think, is an incredible tool to both shake us individually out of the bubble that we find ourselves in. And obviously, it can be offensive and it can be used as a cudgel, but it can be used as an inoffensive way to communicate the lack of foundation of some religious claims. I feel for Shannon as she describes the fact that family and friends are out to reconvert her. It's interesting because that has not been my experience. I actually would welcome the interaction from family and friends. They generally ignore the fact that I'm an atheist. But I also know that that has got to be mentally taxing and exhausting. Whilst you have grieved and lost all of these things, you're also defending yourself. And I'll just state again what we said in the conversation, that if you're in that scenario, you do not have to have a complete philosophical underpinning for your morality and metaphysics and what the nature of reality is. You can reject something without having something to immediately replace it that is complete and perfect. You get to work that out for as long as you need, and it is okay. And I thought it was particularly telling in reference to when she married her husband, who was not a Christian, having that moment of recognition that it would never be enough. She could never be Christian enough for family and friends. I think that is very common as well, that there's always going to be someone more spiritual, more dedicated, more pious. It is a race to the bottom of who can restrict themselves the most to be as pious as possible. That is a game no one wins. It is a game that is best won by leaving and not participating. Thankfully, Shannon was able to do that. I want to thank Shannon for being on the podcast, for sharing her story with humor and passion and honesty about grief. This was a really fun conversation. Thank you, Shannon, for being on the podcast. There are several secular grace thoughts of the week here. I've got a few things jumbling through my mind. Shannon refers to a blog post that I wrote called How to Deconvert in 10 Easy Steps. It was kind of a silly joke title, but in it, I really do try to go through the emotional experience. What does it feel like to go through the deconstruction phases and ultimately deconversion? And one of those is about all the feelings that we feel. And I have talked about this before, but there are some unique elements beyond just grief that we experience during deconversion. One of those is what Shannon talked about, the sense of guilt or shame at our prior gullibility. How could I ever have believed these things? How could I ever have been as convinced as I was? Why did it take so long for me to see the obvious truth? And again, as Shannon and I discussed, you have to give yourself some grace there. You are inside the bubble. It takes tremendous self-awareness and honesty and bravery and courage to overcome the social pressure to remain within the bubble and to break free of that. That's why it is like a born-again experience to come out of it, because you truly do feel a freedom that you recognize you were lacking when you were inside the bubble. Another unique emotion is the loss of a sense of control. For those of us who found prayer useful at all, it was a go-to thing we could do whenever there was a problem, whenever something felt out of our control. We could do something. We could pray. Our Father in heaven would take care of it. On this side of deconversion, one of the really difficult emotions to get through is this loss of a sense of control. The world feels chaotic because it is. And we don't have any control over the chaos of the world. And this is a humbling and sometimes terrifying feeling. I would argue that in the long run, honestly dealing with the world as it actually is, rather than the way we would like it to be, is healthier. And letting go of the illusion of control is real humility and also mentally healthy to recognize what we truly cannot control. One more emotion that is somewhat unique to the deconversion experience is loneliness. And Shannon talked about this as well. You've had all of this community. You could literally walk into a building where 20 people would turn to you and say, "Oh, I've missed you so much. I love you. I love you. I love you." And suddenly that community is gone. Those connections are gone. Maybe even friends and family ties have been weakened in some way or another. There can be a tremendous amount of loneliness. For many of us, when we go through this process, we feel like it's our fault or that we're the only one who's ever experienced these things. It's because we aren't spiritual enough, or we aren't good enough, or we haven't prayed enough, or we haven't read the Bible enough, and we tend to just blame ourselves. Well, I can tell you, listener, you are not alone. You're not crazy. You're not a bad person. You just care about truth. You just care about honesty. You just care about reality. And that's okay. That does not make you a bad person. On the sense of loneliness, I can tell you that because you are not alone, there are many communities online and in person that you can become a member of, and know that you are not alone, that there are other people who have gone through this before you. I have to say I was incredibly flattered that Shannon found my written work useful. The How to Deconvert in 10 Easy-ish Steps and Thought Experiments for Believers. I'd really love for you guys to read those, especially the thought experiments. In the thought experiments, I try to be as neutral as possible. Basically, I'm stating up front, the thought experiments take the idea of a theistic interventionist God deadly serious, and ask the reader to consider the implications and whether those implications fit with the worldview that they currently hold. I would love to hear more thought experiments. If you have some thought experiments that you find useful, I'd love to hear those. Get back to me with those. And then finally, I want to acknowledge the work of Ricky Gervais and how significant that was for Shannon and how much I appreciate his work as well. Shannon and I talk about Afterlife, which I highly recommend. Please go watch that show. There are 3 seasons of it. It is a really honest look at grief and loss as a secular person without faith. And it is heartwarming, and there's lovely connections made throughout the seasons. And it is about being a human being and loving and losing. And it is just a really wonderful story. I also mentioned Ricky's The Invention of Lying. Unlike Afterlife, it very much is a comedy and a little bit silly, but it really does begin with that first lie, him talking to his loved one on her deathbed and just trying to make her feel better. And you can draw a very direct line from wanting to make each other feel better, wanting to make ourselves feel better, all the way to very sophisticated theological frameworks. And it really is that simple. The thing that Afterlife shows us is that really grieving, truly grieving, accepting the finite nature of your own life is a much healthier way to live. It is a much more fulfilling, even, way to live than the fantasy of heaven. We have a number of wonderful upcoming episodes, a couple more Deconversion Anonymous episodes, continuing the theme of duns, the people who deconvert later in life after having lived decades of their Christianity. That theme will continue. And Arlene is going to guest host on an episode with 2 of her girlfriends that I think is going to be absolutely amazing. That'll be coming up in a few weeks. Please be looking out for that. Until then, my name is David, and I am trying to be the graceful atheist. Join me and be graceful human beings. Time for the footnotes. The beat is called Waves from Mackay Beats. Links will be in the show notes. If you'd like to support the podcast, you can promote it on your social media. You can subscribe to it in your favorite podcast application, and you can rate and review it on podchaser.com. You can also support the podcast by clicking on the affiliate links for books on gracefulatheist.com. If you have podcast production experience and you would like to participate with the podcast, please get in touch with me. Have you gone through a faith transition and do you need to tell your story? Reach out. If you are a creator or work in the deconstruction, deconversion, or secular humanism spaces and would like to be on the podcast, just ask. If you'd like to financially support the podcast, there's links in the show notes. To find me, you can Google Graceful Atheist. You can Google Deconversion. You can Google Secular Grace. You can send me an email, gracefulatheist@gmail.com, or you can check out the website, gracefulatheist.com. My name is David, and I am trying to be the graceful atheist. Join me and be graceful human beings. This has been the Graceful Atheist Podcast.